So yes, this is part 5 in the 10-part xAPI and Articulate Storyline tutorial series. If you've done the first 3 parts, then you're good to go with this one. Today we're learning how to collect open text responses from an Articulate Storyline course. So think, survey questions like, how did you feel about this course, or something like that where you're gauging reaction. But also more long response questions where maybe, maybe we have some longer form questions where we want the user to give a response in their own words. We're going to look at how we can capture those responses with xAPI. And again, if you have attended the first 3 sessions or went through those first 3 tutorials, then this is going to be really easy. So I actually think we can do this in like 15 or 20 minutes. And if we want to stay on the call after that, I'll let you guys decide where we take it. So the Slack link, sure, I'll grab that, but maybe towards the end of the call. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming in. If you haven't yet, go ahead and open up that storyline file we've been working on and the xAPI statement.javascript file. All right, so we're going to start we'll start in storyline today, okay? So what we have so far is we just have this, simple form where we're asking for the user's name and email address because we're going to use that in the xAPI statement. And we have a really simple question asking us what the answer is with a little cheat sheet added. Yours might look a little different from this. That's okay if it does. But, once you have this open, we need to add a slide where we have an open text response question, okay? So we'll make that question 2. So I'm just going to right-click this 1.2 slide. I'm going to hover over New Slide, Basic Layouts, Blank. And there are a few ways you can add slides in Storyline, so if you have a way you prefer to do it, go ahead and do that. But we basically just want this nice blank slide here, and we're going to add another question. So I'm going to add a text box. Be like, what was your favorite part about this course? This isn't really a course. Doesn't matter. Let me see what text size I used here, 24. So we're basically just adding a question. It doesn't matter what it is. If you are trying to use this in a project you've been working on yourself, feel free to use what we're going to learn here to do that. But once you've added the simple text box for the question, Anthony, you're having an issue? Yeah, let me know what issue you're having, and I can help you with that. But the other thing we want to add to this slide is a text entry box. So just like how we added these 2 text entry boxes on the first slide where we ask the user for their name and email, we want to add that to this 3rd slide. And we can do that by going to the Insert tab, hover over this Input option in the Interactive Objects section. And then at the bottom, we're going to select Text Entry Field. So, once you've done that, your cursor will change to this plus sign. You can go ahead and just drag a box, and it will serve as the text entry where the user is going to be putting their response. So again, that was Insert, Input, Text Entry Field, just like we did for the name and email address. And you can style this a bit if you want. I mean, it doesn't really have a super flattering, style out the gate. So let's see. Well, whoops, I think I just changed the text color, but I'm just going to give it like a simple outline. I'm going to get rid of this gradient fill, and I'll make this text a bit bigger. I'll make the box a bit bigger. You get the idea. We're just basically making a box where the user can put their response. What we're also going to want to do is we want to, if you've set up your file like mine, we want to make sure that the user can get from this question 1 slide to the question 2 slide. And I'll actually title this next slide question 2. Okay. So question 1, right now when we have someone selecting choice A, B, or C, we're just executing JavaScript. But I'm going to add another trigger here so that it jumps to the next slide after it executes that JavaScript. So I'll just select the choice A rectangle. I'm going to click the create a new trigger button on the right-hand side. And by default, it's jump to the next slide when the user clicks rectangle 1. That's what we want. So I'm going to press OK. And you notice that when you add that trigger, it goes beneath the execute JavaScript trigger. This is really important because if this was the other way around and it was jumping to the next slide first and then executing JavaScript, this second trigger would never get executed because you would press the button, it would jump to the next slide. And now that it's on the next slide, it doesn't even know about this trigger anymore. So make sure the execute JavaScript trigger is first on this one. And I'm just going to copy this jump to next slide trigger, click on choice B and paste it. And same thing with choice C. So now whenever the user picks any of these options, it's going to send off that xAPI statement and jump to question 2, which is the new slide that we're adding. All right, so if everyone is with me so far, then we're almost ready to go. As you see here, when someone answers this question, it's going to set this text entry variable equal to the typed value. We had those same variables with the name and email, and then we changed the variable names to make them a little bit more descriptive over what that variable is actually holding. So we want to do the same thing here. We're going to go ahead and open the variable manager. It's this rightmost icon on the right-hand toolbar here. So yeah, go ahead and open the variable manager. And now we will see this text entry variable. We want to double click that or just click it once to change its name to, let's see, favorite part about the course. We'll name it users favorite. We'll just call it users favorite part. Not a great variable name, but I think it makes sense for what the question is. So you can name that whatever you'd like. Just make sure when we're going to be calling this variable later on that you use the same spelling and capitalization. So we'll press OK to change that variable name, press OK again. And now when you click that text box, you see that it sets the user's favorite part equal to the typed value. So that's good. Maybe I just add a submit button here. I'm just going to copy this button from here. Oh, whoops. You can just add a submit button or anything. I'm going to get rid of all the triggers associated with it because I'm going to change it to say submit. Can see chat, can't see video stream. Try and catch the recording. Anthony, it might be, maybe the browser. Yeah, people have had issues with different browsers in the past. But it sounds like that's what's going on for Anthony. But yeah, the recording will be available as soon as the session is over. Okay, so right here I just have this submit button. There are no triggers associated with it. All it's doing right now is it's getting the focus off of this text entry box. So when the user types something and presses submit, it doesn't do anything, but it takes the focus away from the text entry so that variable actually gets changed like it's supposed to be. Okay, so our storyline file is looking good. We have this variable. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the code so that we know where we can include this response in the xAPI statement. So I just opened up this xAPI-statement.javascript file that we've been working on for the last few weeks now, last month or so. So I'll give everyone a minute to open up this file. But I think most of you probably have it open already anyway, because I said, to open it beforehand in the chat. So we can probably move along here. So for those of you who are not at the 4th session, you're not going to see these two parameters right here, object description and activity type. Don't worry, like you saw from week 3, the statements will still send. All we did last week was we added some more information to this object. So we added the object type, we added a description, and we added an activity type. So just catch that 4th recording whenever you have some time. But again, you're not going to be behind today. So we're finally getting into a new object here that we're going to add to our statement. And this one we're going to add is really important. It's the result object. Okay, this is where we hold information about quiz scores, user responses, whether or not someone passed something successfully, all of that good stuff. So we're finally going beyond the actor-verb-object model, and we're doing actor-verb-object result. So I want you to go to this closing curly bracket for the object. Okay, so if you look above where we added this result variable, you're going to see one curly bracket. We want to go right above to that next one and add a line break. Okay. And we also want to add a comma after the object closes, because we're adding to this list of actor, verb, and object. So just like we have commas here and here, we need a comma after the object now. I'll press enter to make another line break. I'm going to open a curly bracket, and it will be a closed curly bracket. Well, before I do that, actually, let's go ahead and define it. So this is the result object. So in quotes, we'll type result. We'll add a colon, and then we'll open and close those curly brackets. So again, I think you're all probably pretty familiar with JSON by this point. We're just adding the result object to this list, and it's a child of the statement object itself. So result, colon, open and close that curly bracket. And what we're doing today is really simple. We're just adding the response object, or property, I should say. Okay, so we'll add response, and I'm just going to add a placeholder for now. Okay, so this is what we need here. So we have the result object, the response is the property, and I'm just adding a placeholder as the value. And next week, when we get into the quiz score stuff, we're going to add a lot more to this result object. But just like these properties that we added last week, adding those additional properties is optional. And a couple more things about this. Where I have this placeholder, this is obviously where we're going to store the response that the user types to this question. But it's also where you would put the responses to any questions, not just open text responses. So I know last week I meant, in the previous weeks I've mentioned that this isn't the best way to track which response the user is clicking, because we were putting like choice A as the object for the statement, but really it would be like question 1 would be the object of the statement, and then the user's choice, whether it's A, B, or C, would go here in this response property. So we have a placeholder right now. Now we need to get the user's actual response in here. They're typing in something. It's getting set to this storyline variable, user's favorite part. So how are we going to get that to here? Let's see who can answer that first. How do we get the storyline variable that's going to change when the user enters this text response into this xAPI statement? Get var, yes, Joe. That's right. Just like it's the same way we got the name and the email address. Add it as a variable? Yes. Okay. So we're going to hop back. We're going to scroll up to the first part of this function where we're defining these variables. So see here, we're defining the player variable, the name, the email. Now we're going to add a user response variable. So Let me see. I want to make sure I title it the same thing as I did in my tutorial. Okay, yeah, user response. Perfect. So user response. And again, we're using a constant here because every time we fire this function, this is going to equal the same thing every time. So we're not going to, redefine user response down here somewhere in the code. When this code executes, this variable will not change. So we're using the const keyword. All right, so equals should be player.getVar, just like Joe suggested. This is how we get the value of a storyline variable. And in quotes, we just type the name of that variable, which in my case is user's favorite part. And because we're asking them about their favorite part of the course. Okay? So, make sure you have quotes around this and you spell it exactly how you spelled it in the storyline course. Okay, and so now that we have this variable, we need to use it. So we're setting this variable equal to whatever the user enters in this open text response. That's perfect. Now we need to go down to where we have this placeholder, the result.response part of this statement. And we're going to get rid of that whole placeholder and just type in user response. Because now that variable will be set by the time we send this xAPI statement, so we will be good to go. Okay. Now, this is perfect. This works fine if this is our whole quiz. We have one question here. We have an open text question. But what if we want to add another open text question? So I'm just going to duplicate this slide here. So I'm going to right-click this slide and press duplicate. I'm going to change this duplicated slide to question 3. Again, we're back in storyline. I duplicated the question 2 slide. I changed the title of that duplicated slide to question 3. Now I'm going to go back to the question 2 slide, and I'm going to make it so that when the user clicks the submit button, it jumps to the next slide. Okay, so don't forget to add that trigger just because we're going to be testing later. So when the user clicks the submit button, it jumps to the next slide. And now on question 3, we need to make it a different question. So what was your favorite part? We're going to change it to what was your least favorite part. And again, it's using this default text entry variable. We don't want to just have it be text entry. So I'm going to open the project, the variable manager by pressing this icon on the right. And I'm going to change this variable's name from text entry to user's least favorite part. Okay, so now we have 2 variables here, and as you can as you know what's going to happen with the code, say we execute this same code when the user answers this question. That's good. We'll get what they enter in this open text response in the xAPI statement. Perfect. But what if we execute that same code on when the user clicks this submit button? Well, if we look at our code, we're setting the user response equal to the user's favorite part. So even if the user enters something completely different in this least favorite part question, we're not going to get that data. So what do we do about that? Anyone who has not already completed the text-based tutorials want to take a guess at this? Add another get var. Okay, say we add another get var. So say we say, user next response equals player.getVar user's least favorite part. No one do this. We're just gonna see if this is viable. Okay, so we have this other variable. Now, how would we know down here which one of those variables we use? Because again, we want to make this code as reusable as possible. Right now, we're including user response. How are we going to know whether we use user response or user next response? Use both? I guess we could do like user next response, but then it's just going to be like a big string combined of, of all of this. And maybe that would work. But let's say we just want to show only their response to each to the question they're on. Array? Yeah, I mean, I think that could work. You can make that work. But again, let's say we just want to have, when we look at question 2, when we look at this response part, we only want to see the user's response to question 3 in this case. But yeah, I like the way you're thinking. Magic? Joe, why don't you tell us what form that magic comes in? I think you know the answer. All right, Joe. I'll give it away here. So we're going to use a similar approach to the one that we've used before. You can't recall? Okay, cool. Supernatural, yeah. Good guess, Joe. Okay, so we faced this challenge before. We've actually faced this challenge last week. Remember when we had to use the activity type in the object description? So, or no, we actually used this from week 3 when we had to pass in the verb and the verb ID, right? So every time we execute this code from storyline, it's going to be a different verb. Maybe they're selecting choice A or viewing the cheat sheet. And the object changes too every time. So this is no different. So we're going to do this with a parameter, okay? Just like we did up here with all of these other things that will change based off of what action the user is taking or what question they're answering. So if you did type in that other code, go ahead and delete that. And here's what we're going to do. So go ahead and add a comma after whatever the last parameter is that you have up here. If you were here last week, that will be after activity type. And if you were not here last week, that will be after object ID. And we're going to add the open text var parameter. Okay. So what we're telling this function is when we execute this function, we're saying when we execute you and use you, in a production environment, we're going to tell you what this open text variable is at the time we're executing it. So we're going to pass this value in as an argument when we execute the function. Is everyone clear on that? And if not, this might make it clearer. So now, now that we're telling the code, we're going to give you this variable. We don't need to hard code this variable in right here where we say, the variable that we want to get is the user's favorite part. We can get rid of that, and we're just going to put in this placeholder, open text var. So now when we execute the code from storyline, we're just going to give it the name of the variable that we want to include in that response variable when we execute the code. And that's what we're going to do next. So it's pretty cool how you can use, use parameters and arguments and stuff like this. And if you're noticing that, wow, this is starting to be quite a long list of, the different values that we need to include every time we want to send a statement, you're right. And it's only going to get longer next week. But in a future tutorial, I think it's week 8, I'm going to show you how we can break this one massive function down into smaller functions so that we can use them a bit more efficiently. But we'll get there later. So for now, we're just going to deal with a really long function. Okay, so is everyone there with that? Writing this open text var, make sure it's spelled exactly the same, and put that between the parentheses for where we're doing this player.getVar to set this user response variable. And we don't need to change anything down here because, again, that variable will be set based off of whatever storyline variable we pass to it. Okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and move on here. Now all we need to do is execute the function. So what I'm going to do, just like we've done in the past, is we're going to copy this function. So after the function keyword and before that curly bracket, do you need a semicolon? No, but you can. So again, with modern JavaScript, there's a very small percentage of times when you need to use a semicolon. JavaScript is pretty smart now. It knows when lines end and start. So we used to use semicolons at the end of every line in JavaScript to say, okay, now this line of code is executed. But if we get rid of all of them, it's still going to work just fine. So it's up to you personally, just to be safe, you can use them every time, but we don't need them. Our code's going to run just fine either way. Yeah, no problem. Good question. If you were here last week, do you need to copy the code again? So there are going to be some things that are changing. Okay, so I think the answered verb will be changing. Yeah, you can just copy it. So if you were here last week, just go ahead and copy the JavaScript that we use for choice A or any of these choices here. Okay, so you can click on this JavaScript, copy this. We're going to add in a comma, and we'll have to fix that stuff up. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it from scratch again, just as to reinforce what we've been doing here. So I'm going to copy this, go back over to storyline. We'll go to this question 2 slide now. And I'm going to click on the submit button, and that's where we're going to execute this JavaScript. So I'm going to create a new trigger associated with the submit button. The action will not be jump to slide. It will be execute JavaScript. So scroll down. It's under the more section. When the user clicks rectangle 1, yes, that's right. And now click on where it says JavaScript to go ahead and put in the JavaScript that we want to execute. So I'm going to paste what I copied from our code file. And this has all of the parameters that are just waiting for us to pass in those arguments, which are, going to be placed into the xAPI statement object, how we want them to be placed, how we've set it up. So it's asking for the verb ID, object ID, all of that good stuff. I think I'm just going to, well, we can get it really quick. You can pull that stuff from the existing JavaScript from the previous weeks, but I'm going to go to, what is it, xapi.vocab.pub. Okay, weird. It looks like it's not loading very well right now. So I take that back. I mean, if you were here at the last sessions, you know the drill with this. So I'm just going to take it from one of my from this previous JavaScript. So I'm going to copy the answered URI. And I go back to the submit button, hop back into this JavaScript, and I'm going to paste in the verb ID. Make sure it's surrounded by quotes and the commas are outside of the quotes. The verb we can change to answered in quotes. The object, so our object now is question 2, right? So in quotes, I'm going to make that question 2. The object ID, again, we're just using the example.com domain for now. I think in a later tutorial, I'll show you what this would all look like if this was on your domain or your organization's domain. But for now, we'll just keep it really simple. Example.com/question2 in quotes. Object description. So I'll say question 2 in Devlin's sample course. Activity type is going to be, so the activity type is going to be a URI. So is this thing going to play nicely with this here? Let's see. Well, the open text, so I'm going to leave activity type for now. I'm going to copy that from our previous code. The open text var, though, we're going to pass that in quotes. And for question 2, that is user's favorite part for me. Okay, so I'm just going to press OK here. If there are any questions about this, just drop it in the chat. I'm going to grab that activity type for a question from the choice A JavaScript. And here it is. Again, if you weren't here last week, don't worry about this part. You're not going to have this many arguments you need to pass in. Just swap out the places that make sense for you. So I'll get rid of activity type, paste in that question activity type. Okay, so once you've replaced all of these parameters with their respective arguments that we're passing in, and you've made sure that the commas are outside of the quotes, all of these strings are surrounded by quotes, we're ready to go. Go ahead and press OK. It's been down all day. Jeez, that's no good. I wonder if they're working on it or what's going on. Okay, so it looks like everyone should have made it this far. Swap out what you need in your code, or just add on that variable at the end, and swap out choice C or whatever with question 2. And again, like I mentioned earlier, look at what's happening on this button right now. So if you've added the execute JavaScript trigger after the jump to next slide, it's going to be beneath it in the execution order. So use that upward arrow to move the execute JavaScript trigger to be the first action that takes place when you click on this rectangle. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this trigger. I'm going to click on question 3, and I'm going to paste it on to this this question 3 submit button. Okay, so we're copying what we just typed. We're copying the execute JavaScript trigger from question 2, pasting it onto the submit button for question 3. I'm going to click on the JavaScript to open up what it is that we're executing, and I'm going to change the places where it says 2 to 3. Because we're not answering question 2 anymore, we are answering question 3. And we don't want to pass this user's favorite part variable. We want to pass in the user's least favorite part variable. Okay, so again, change that to whatever it is that you name the variable. Make sure that it's spelled exactly as you have it in the variable manager, or it's not going to work. Capitalization and everything is important here. So once we're done with that, we will press OK again, and we are in good shape. Okay, that we've done all we need to do if you've made it this far. Could you paste the JavaScript trigger? Yeah. So this will be the JavaScript trigger for question 3. And I will also paste what it will be if you weren't here last week, and I'll show you how I do that. Whoops. Okay, so here I am in the chat key. I'm just going to get rid of these last 2 arguments. This is looking good. So if you were not here last week, that's what the JavaScript trigger should look like for question 3. Okay, so are there any questions about this? Because from here, we're going to publish it and actually, look at those statements in a learning record store, just like we've done on the last weeks. So if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and publish this and, see this code actually do some work. So let's click publish once we're done. And collect text response. Yep. I'll publish it to my desktop so it's easy to find. And if this is your first time doing this, we're publishing this as a web package. So you can do it as other options, but just to keep it simple for us, we're going to do a web package. Once it's done publishing, don't click anything else, just click open. So this is going to open the containing folder. And does anyone want to tell me what the 2 things are that we need to do here for those who have been coming for a bit now? What do we need to do to this folder to make sure that it sends our statement successfully? Edit the story.html file. Yes, that is one. So I'm going to right-click this and click on Open with Code. Change story.html. Yeah, what else? So think about what we're changing this to. Move in the JS and the other file. Yes. So that's the other thing we need to do. We need to add 2 files. We need to add this xAPI statement.javascript file that we've been working on, and we need to add the xAPI JavaScript wrapper so that we can use these easy commands like change config and send statement. So that wrapper is what lets us use these commands right there. So again, I right-click the story.html file. I press open with code, but you can also do open with and then select your code editor of choice or text editor of choice. Once that's open, we're going to scroll down to the bottom and find this closing body tag. It looks like this. Paste it in the chat. So you can Control F for that if you want. We're going to add some line breaks right above it. And like I told you all before, where I usually get this code is I just open up a previous file. So, I'm going to look on my desktop. This is the file from last week. So I'll just right click and open this last week's story.html file, scroll to the bottom and copy and paste it. It's kind of lazy. I mean, I think I could write this from memory, no problem, but I just like don't want to mess something up and it not work. So I just copy and paste it. And what this is doing is this is linking our xAPI wrapper file and our xAPI statement file to the storyline course. So that when we execute this code over here, you know, when we're executing this send statement function, it's actually doing something. Because if we don't link to this file, it's not going to have any idea what that function is. Can you paste that code into the chat? Yeah, for sure. So those are the script tags that we're adding at the end of this story.html file. And the second part, so make sure, so right now with those script tags added, do file save. It's really important that we save this file once we add those script tags. And once that's done and you're sure it's saved, you can go ahead and close the story.html files. We don't need those open anymore. What we do need to do is we need to move the xAPI statement.js file and the wrapper into our output. So I'm just going to do this the simple way. I'm going to do file save as, and I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to go to this published storyline output folder that we just published, and I'm going to press save to save the JavaScript file here. You could also just save this file wherever you have it on your hard drive or whatever it is, and then you can just copy it and paste it in. So I'm going to save as to get it over here. If I look at my output folder now, I can see that xAPI-statement.js file, but we also need the wrapper. So, you know, just like before, I just go to a previous output folder, I copy the wrapper file, and I paste it back in. But I'll go ahead and paste the link where you can find that if you don't have that available. So here's what I do. I'll just show you xAPI JavaScript wrapper. So it's just this GitHub link, ADLnet, SCORM to xAPI. Wait, no. It's this one. Okay, xAPI wrapper, that's what we want. We need to install it. So you have to scroll down a little bit. It will say installing, downloading the latest release version, and there's a link to download the latest release. So I just click that. And then the first link here, xAPI wrapper.min.js, that's the file we're adding to our published output. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in the chat in case you didn't have that file on your computer already. And once these two files are added, we can go ahead and open that story.html file in our browser, and those statements should be sending just like we want them to. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. I opened it. It opened in Chrome by default for me. That's good. I'm going to add my name and email address. So, oh, I didn't add a button to this submit button here to bring us to the next slide. So I'm just going to press the next button in the bottom right. So what is the answer? Let's view the cheat sheet. The answer is C. That's right. So we're going to do choice C. What was my favorite part about this course? It was very easy. What was my least favorite part about this course? It did not teach me anything. All right, yeah, pretty useless course we made here, but let's see if we're collecting the data. So again, I'm using Veracity LRS. The link for that is lrs.io. I'm gonna go ahead and sign in. Let's see. I think I use this one. So yeah, it's this. I think it's this Crowdcast test LRS I've been using. Once you are signed into your LRS, if you're using Veracity, we can view our data by going to xAPI data on the left and then selecting statements. And okay, this is looking good. What we have here, we can see Devlin. So this stuff is from a week ago. Wait a minute. Okay, so we have some issues with our response to question 1. But let's just look at question 2 and 3 for now. So we can see Devlin answered question 2. Let's check this out. Oh, here we go. If you expand the statement and look at the result response object, we can see my response. It was very easy, right? And question 3, we'll do the same. This is question 3. My response is, it did not teach me anything. Okay, so let's go ahead and modify this statement stream so that we can see the responses from this main display. So let's press the configure option in the top right. Let me see if there are any questions. Nope. Okay, so from the veracity statement stream, select configure. And if you look on the left, we can see that right now stored is turned on. Actually, I guess that's important. We'll leave that. But we want to turn on response. Okay, so it's the last toggle in this list of common fields. So I'm going to turn that on, and then I'm going to close this dialog box. And we can see in really small text now the response is, it did not teach me anything, and it was very easy. Now, did everyone, did we make it here if you were following along? Let me know in the chat, because I'm going to tackle why we didn't get a response. We didn't get that cheat sheet and that choice C data. Is there a way to export all the answers separately? What do you mean by that? I mean, because we can query, what we're going to get to in week 9, we can query the LRS and pull these responses, and we can make like a big list of these responses. We can make different columns so that we can, put the user's name and the user's response. Once we get into querying, you can really build whatever kind of reports and dashboards you want, and then using veracity, you can also, I'm sure you can build dashboards like that where it just has responses sorted by user and that sort of thing. But we're not going to get into visualizations and dashboards and stuff like that. But it's definitely possible to present this data however you want to. It might take a little bit of coding or configuration with the the built-in like chart building tools, but it's definitely possible. Path not resolved the open text var. Yeah, that's, I'm not sure what that console error could be referring to. Oh, open text var. So notice that your O in open is capitalized. So if you are going to make that O capitalized, make sure that it's capitalized here as the parameter and here as the get var. So check that out. That might be the issue you're having. Let's look at what happened with questions 1 and 2. Let's see what console error we got. Okay, it didn't give us choice A. It's not giving us a really clear console error, but I think what's going on here is we're telling the statement that we're going to include this open text variable. We're trying to get that variable from the course, and we're trying to include that here in the user's response. I think this will fix it. So with question 1, you see where we're executing this JavaScript. We're going to add another argument to this, and it's just going to be null. I think this might work. We're gonna test this out here. And again, the way we're doing this is kind of messed up because ideally we would want the responses to be included in this part of the xAPI statement. But we're not going to do that until next week because there's a lot more we want to add here than just their response to the question. We also want to add like how well they're doing and their current score and stuff like that. So I'm going to add this null argument. Basically say we're passing nothing as we're passing nothing for that user response variable. And I think that actually might pull an error with this player.getVar because it's going to try to get null and nothing's going to happen here. I don't want to confuse this too much. Here's what I'm going to do. Just to test that out, I'm going to copy this code right here and try to paste it. I'm I'm going to try to just execute it from the console because you can do that, okay? So we can execute some code right here, just like I've shown us doing before, and that's going to simulate what would happen when the user presses the button as if we were to publish everything all over again. Okay, yeah, sure enough, that's not going to work. Let me just try it without the null. Yeah, it's not liking what we're doing here. Let's try. Oh, because we don't have a variable named test, so it's not going to be able to get anything. Okay. We are, I think, what do you guys want to do? Do you want me to show you how I would troubleshoot this and get this fixed, or do we want to hang tight until next week and I can show you how we will get this working for the first multiple choice question and this cheat sheet option? Null wouldn't be in parentheses because null is actually a data type in JavaScript. So just like we would have a string, which is in parentheses, or a variable, which isn't in parentheses, think of Booleans. So like true and false, those aren't in parentheses. Null is just like a data type that developers use to say, this value is nothing. This value is just like a void, basically. So that's a JavaScript thing, but that's not solving our problem. What's happening here is Storyline is trying to get a variable. Storyline is trying to get this open text var variable, and when we don't pass in a valid variable here, it's like breaking our code a bit because we're trying to get a variable that doesn't exist. So I'll show you what I would do. It might be confusing. There's probably a more concise way to do this, but if open text var, so this is an if statement. So it's basically saying if this variable exists, we're going to get it from Storyline. I think this should work. Maybe I should test this. Could you have the JavaScript from Storyline send one of the articulate variables since those are global? Yeah, that's another way we could do it. So we could create a variable in here and just call it placeholder. So this is probably a simpler way to do it. So we'll just add a placeholder variable in here. It's not set to anything. And then for like choice A, instead of putting null here, we would just put placeholder. And you can name that whatever you want. Maybe it makes more sense to name it just like empty or something like that. But that's one way we could do it. And again, this is only a problem right now. Like, but once we get to the end of these next few weeks, we're going to have the code set up much better, much more clean, so we don't have to do workarounds like this. So, because we're not going to be just using this one send statement function for everything. We're going to be using like a send answered function that we send every time someone answers a question. So we know we'll want this response part. And then we'll have like a send viewed function that only has the elements it needs when we want to say that the user views a cheat sheet or something. So we're going to get there in week 8. I'm just showing you some workarounds now if you want to play around with this on your own time. And yeah. So I think we'll dive into if statements too. We're going to need to in a later tutorial. So this is one way to do it. I'm just going to get rid of this. Yeah, I think Joe's solution is more simple for this stage we're at now. So we're just going to leave that here. We'll add that placeholder variable to our Storyline course, and we'll add that placeholder string to all of these execute JavaScript triggers where we don't actually want to pass in the user's response. Same with the view cheat sheet. We're just going to add this placeholder variable. If anyone doesn't know why we're doing this, feel free to say in chat. You just write anything, not anything. It needs to be a variable. Because again, that's where I think the code is getting tripped up. It's trying to grab a Storyline variable that previously didn't exist because we weren't passing anything in. And then we tried passing null. And the code is like, running into issues right here. So as long as you pass in a storyline variable that you've created and the name is correct, it's okay if that variable is empty and we're not even using it in the course. So you can name this variable anything, but what you're adding to the JavaScript needs to match that name. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this just so we can see if it works now. So I'm just going to call it collect text response 1. And again, I'll show you how quickly we can get this output folder ready. So this is what the workflow looks like. So we publish it. I go to open. I'm going to open this story.html file with my code editor. I'm going to hop back over, go to my desktop, go to the file we just set up. I'm going to copy these 2 code files, open up this story.html file. Since I copied these 2 code files, I'm going to hop back over to the new file I just published. I'm going to paste those files in. Now I'm going to go to my code editor. We see these script tags that we just added. I'm going to copy those, scroll down to the bottom of this, and paste these script tags in right above the closing body tag. Now our output is ready. So once you get the hang of that, it literally takes like you just saw, like 20 seconds if you're not explaining it. Okay, so you guys probably know the drill. I can go back through that if you are publishing it again and need to see it, but I hope that shows how fast it is to get this output folder ready once you've made it this far. Let's just name it something else. Test at test.com. So we'll know now exactly. So what is the answer? So we'll view the cheat sheet, close it. The answer is choice C. My favorite part is that the first xAPI statements work now. Okay, let's see what we've got. So I'm going to refresh this. And here we go. We did it. So test viewed the cheat sheet, test answered choice 3, and test answered question 2. Test's favorite part is that the first xAPI statements work now, and sure enough, they do. So sorry that we ran into that little hiccup there. Again, I haven't, when I use this in a production environment, I have the functions split up like this. And if you went through the tutorials, it's kind of like we're starting back from the end of tutorial 3 for each one. And it's like, if you are going through the other one, just add stuff on. As we see now, that can lead into some issues if you're trying to call a variable that does not exist in Storyline. So I think I'll have to fix up the text-based tutorials. So I'm glad we did this and figured out that was an issue.